Well, they immediately put me in solitary confinement, and when I got in there, I just cried for a long time, and I stayed in solitary confinement. And this time for maybe 5 or 6 weeks, and I sort of went crazy. And because I got such a big sentence, they felt like I could be a danger to myself and to others, and so I didn't have any human contact during that time. And so it was really bad for me. It was, I wouldn't wish it on anyone. It's torture, actually.
Welcome to episode 37 of People Are the Answer. I truly believe that people are the only answer to the world's many problems. I'm Jeffrey M. Zucker, a serial entrepreneur, here to learn how innovators are creating outsized, transformational social impact. Today's episode features Chris Wilson. After spending 16 years in prison, Chris has gone on to be a serial social entrepreneur, storyteller, artist, social justice advocate, author, and more. His master plan book and course have impacted countless lives, especially of incarcerated individuals as they prepare to successfully re-enter society. Chris and I discuss his difficult upbringing that had him at funerals every month, how he turned his life around while incarcerated, his rampant helping of others, starting businesses, and creating art since he got out, and much more. Here is Chris Wilson on People Are the Answer. Chris, thanks so much for joining me on People Are the Answer.
Thanks for having me.
It'd be great if you could start off by telling me kind of a little bit about your background, your current role, and where you're based.
Sure. My background is I'm a visual artist, formerly incarcerated. I spent 16 and a half years incarcerated in the state of Maryland. I've been home from prison for 10 years. I've worked as a social entrepreneur, founded a few companies, a construction company, furniture design company, and eventually started a foundation that funds prison education. And I'm really driven as an advocate to reform the criminal justice system through education. I feel like that is the key to reducing recidivism rates. And I'm really passionate about creating art and collecting art.
Love that. Thanks for sharing that. And you answered it a little bit already, but what would you say in life generally motivates you?
I always describe myself as a person of service, and I just want to be of service, of use of people. I used to tell some of my employees that, I want to feel needed when I get up in the morning, that I'm needed, whether on a construction job site or whether a project that I'm working on with the team, but just having a purpose. And so I'm a purpose-driven person, and that's what drives me. I want to do some good in the world, and I want to tell some powerful stories through art.
Yeah, I can certainly appreciate that. And I read a little bit about you, and I watched some of your interviews, and it certainly sounds like you had it tough growing up. I'm curious, where did you grow up? What was it like there? I've heard you describe it as a combat zone.
Yes. I grew up in Washington, D.C. in the late 80s and early 90s. A very different city than it is today. And I do, unfortunately, describe it as a combat zone because it was. We had, insane homicide rates in Washington, D.C. around this time. So sleeping on the floor, shootouts every day, getting used to it. And, drug crack epidemic was a problem in the community. And it was just tough. I didn't really understand. I used to ask my grandmother all the time about who we at war with, Grandma. Like, I really don't know what's going on. Why are there so many helicopters? Why are there tanks? Like in 1992, they call it a National Guard. Why are there tanks outside, Grandma? What's happening?
Wow.
And I still didn't understand until years later what was going on. So it was very challenging and difficult for me.
Yeah, it sounds like a very tough place to grow up. And, I know you ended up having to bury some friends and family at a young age.
A lot of friends and family. Yeah. Buried a lot of friends and family, and lost, just overall lost a lot of people at a young age. And when I talk about it now, it was unfortunate that so many people like myself, at a certain point, become desensitized to the gun violence and to the deaths. And so I think going to funerals every month of your life is a signal that there's a problem.
Yeah, well, I mean that's terrifying to even imagine being in that place. And um, I was watching your interview with Trevor Noah the other day from a few years ago, and I mean, first off, you did an incredible job. He's an amazing interviewer as well. Um, and I'm not gonna live up to him. I'll warn you now, but I'll do my best.
In all fairness, we did have drinks and we kicked it before we went out there, so we were relaxed.
Okay, that's cool. That's good to know.
So I felt comfortable.
Well, you talked there about how your dad was a policeman and you saw him do some really awful things, but it made it hard to actually do anything about it.
Yes. So he was my stepfather. So it was my mom's boyfriend. She had a baby by him. He wasn't my biological father, but yes, it was a very interesting dynamic in my life at the time, especially since when I was young, I wanted to be a police officer growing up. I had this vision of what police officers do, and some police officers actually do this, but remember Officer Friendly when they would come to the school and they would talk about engaging community. I just saw them as some really cool people, but my experience was very different than the Officer Friendly experience at school. And so my mom was dating this police officer who was nuts. I mean, he was like Denzel in Training Day, real smooth, handsome guy, ex-Marine, but he was doing everything under the sun. And that was a problem. And it just really distorted my perception of police officers, unfortunately. And, it's never went back to me wanting to be a police officer. Like, there's no way I could do it now or would want to.
No, that's understandable. And I know that you were convicted at age 17. Can you talk about what led you to that?
Absolutely. So my mom and I were attacked by this police officer, and he pled down to a lesser offense and got out maybe a year and a half later, or probably less than that, and started stalking the family. And he promised, my mom didn't want to deal with him anymore, so he promised that he would take us out one by one. So my brother and cousin were gunned down in front of the house. My brother survived. My cousin passed away. And I started carrying a gun after this for protection. We kept getting phone calls. We coming after you guys. You're next. You're next. And one night some man came after me. I had my weapon on me. I still went to a gas station. There was a lot of people out there because it was a lot of light too. People on the payphones. They had payphones back then. And I said that these guys who are following me aren't going to try anything with all these people around. And they did. And I pulled my weapon out and fired it. And I ended up taking a person's life. They ran away, but I had hit someone. So they died a few blocks away. I didn't know it. I found out weeks later that I had took a person's life, and I was found guilty and sentenced to actual life in prison.
That's really hard to swallow. I mean, especially given that you were trying to protect yourself and at such a young age as 17.
Yeah.
What was it like going through that process, getting arrested and then having to go into court?
I often describe it as being teleported to another planet or another dimension because of the prisons in America are really based on punishment. So it's in every aspect. It's like, how can I punish you in many ways as possible? And so that experience for me was it was an awful experience. A strip search and yelling and lights and just solitary confinement. It was awful. And not saying I didn't deserve to be punished. I took a person's life, but they called it a correctional facility. They actually wasn't correcting anything there.
Yeah, I mean, they really strip away the humanity, and it's really disgusting to see. Regardless of what someone's worst mistake is, no reason to treat a human like that. And when that life sentence first came down, like, where did your mind go?
Well, they immediately put me in solitary confinement, and when I got in there, I just cried for a long time. And I stayed in solitary confinement this time for maybe 5 or 6 weeks. And
wow,
I sort of went crazy. And because I got such a big sentence, they felt like I could be a danger to myself and to others. And so I didn't have any human contact during that time. And so it was really bad for me. It was, I wouldn't wish it on anyone. It's torture, actually.
Yeah, it sounds cruel. Anytime someone's explained that situation to me, it sounds like a nightmare. And it's part of why I work on criminal justice reform is just, I'm fortunate to not have been thrown into that nightmare. I've grown up with privilege, and um, the idea of it, though, I have empathy. I can't even imagine, but just thinking about it just seems like a nightmare. And we need to do whatever we can to improve the system.
Totally. I mean, this is one of the many reasons why I have committed my life to being a criminal justice advocate to change it. Because just on the solitary confinement point, 95% of people who go to jails and prisons will return to society. Do you think that it helps them by torturing them while they are incarcerated? They come home worse. They come home damaged. And taxpayers are paying for this torture. It just doesn't work. It doesn't help us. So I feel like any chance I get to speak out against it, I'm going to do that.
At what point in your prison sentence did you decide that you were going to turn your life around and embrace education?
2 years into my prison sentence, I made a decision after having a conversation with a person who became my mentor and godbrother. His name's Steven. And he had life too. And he was studying, and he shared with me his plan of being free one day and living a beautiful life was through education. He was going to educate himself and study and teach himself computer programming, buy his dream car. He had places that he wanted to travel. And so he had it all mapped out. And I started to think about my life and what my skill sets were and what I wanted to do. And I just went back to my cell and stayed in there for a few days. And I started developing what I call my master plan. And so it was some steps that I needed to take. So I had this vision of who I would be, let's say at age 40. Yeah, age 40. And I worked backwards. I wanted a college degree. I needed to study. I needed to map out a plan. And so that's what I did.
That's great. And that ended up being the basis of your book, right?
Yeah, it's the book isn't yes, the book isn't just for people impacted by the criminal justice system, people who want to understand it. It's about your life. The master plan applies to anyone. I think I imagine that everyone at some point in their lives think about, is this like I'm a cashier at Walmart, but like I'm really good at photography, and I wish I could spend my summers doing bird watching in Brazil, and I wish I was just doing this. And it's like, why can't you do that? Why can't you write that plan down? Why can't you come up with a strategy to work towards it and live the best life that you can live? And so my book is about that. It's about resiliency, and it's about achieving your goals in life.
That's wonderful. I look forward to checking it out. And I know as you began focusing on education, you earned multiple degrees, you learned multiple languages.
Yes.
How was that? Did that really change your experience in there?
I mean, yes. I think the pursuit of education for me was a way for me to escape, figuratively escape prison. And I would go down the rabbit hole of just studying every language that I've learned and I've studied the culture, and I studied history, and it just was a way. And I knew that the pursuit of education, of earning my college degree, and taking every vocational shop that was available while incarcerated, I knew that no one can take that knowledge away from me. After having lost my freedom, I said, the things that I've learned, you can't take it from me. So all I need is one shot to execute. And so when I finally had a chance to be free, I said, oh, I've studied business. I've studied philosophy. I got a degree in sociology. I've actually studied and learned how I best learn and absorb information. So, memorizing vocabulary for languages and stuff became not easy, but just very doable for me. So, and I continue to say I'm studying French now. So I'm adding to to the list.
What languages are on your list?
So obviously I speak English, but when I did start my pursuit, I started with Italian, but I went back and studied the English grammar, which is actually very complicated, and the language itself, which was borrowed from Spanish and German and all these languages, and the phonetics are very complicated. So I started there first. Then I went on to study Italian and their culture. Really loved Italian. I really wanted to start with Spanish, but I had access to someone on my tier who was an Italian person, had some tapes. He was like, my family wants me to learn Italian. I was like, give me the tapes and give me the books. I'll learn it. So I started there to learn the grammar, which was really important. Came up with these memorization techniques to help myself. And then after that, I went to study and learn Spanish. Really enjoy Spanish. I think Spanish is my favorite. And after that, I went to on to study Mandarin and all of these languages. I studied how to read, write, and speak in these languages, and then a little bit of Yoruba, which is a Nigerian dialect, some Haitian Creole, and then now I'm studying French.
Wow. That's amazing. I mean, I think it takes a certain type of brain to be able to manage all those various languages. Like I only unfortunately speak English fluently. I know a little bit of Spanish, a little bit of Hebrew.
Yeah.
But I end up mixing the two up in my head. So
I would love to learn Hebrew too one day, by the way. So I spent some time in Israel, and I'll be back in Israel this October. But I think that's a really cool language to learn.
That's awesome to hear. Israel's an important place to me. My wife and I both have family there. My dad was born there.
Yeah.
And yeah, it certainly has pushed me to try to learn a little bit more Hebrew. I'm certainly not at a conversational level at this point, but I can tend to figure out what's going on.
Got it.
So I know, during this process, you started a book club and a career center. Can you tell me more about that?
Right. So the book club started first, I believe. Book Crushers is what I called it. And so I started by reading a book a week. And initially, I was somewhat embarrassed or shy about what I was reading. I had a thing for self-help books. And I used to get teased. So it's like, why are you reading these books? Some of the books were like 92 Ways How to Talk to Anyone by Lil Loudest. And people would make fun of me. You don't know how to talk to people? And I would say, I plan to be an international business person at one point, and any tips that I can learn how to communicate with different people and like, what's the harm in this? But I got teased so much, I started putting covers on my books when I read, like in public. And so I started a book club because I was learning so much, and I wanted to share all these interesting books and ideas with people. And so we started this book club. I got permission to do it. And they gave us free coffee. So I had coffee, and we had a book list of books that we wanted to read, and we'll read them, and then we would meet up and discuss them. And I think it was a wonderful experience for me. And I'm talking about hundreds and hundreds of books. We would spend time. I remember spending 6 months reading about French history and the French Revolution and Napoleon, down to philosophy. I mean, we just studied everything, and I thought it was wonderful. And I still read a book a week. So people send me messages now saying they're the number one book crusher, and they read more books than me. And I always respond by, as long as there's air in my lungs, you can never be number one.
I love that. I mean, I really appreciate the dedication and the positive attitude that you were able to maintain despite the situation.
Yeah, totally. And there was nothing else really to do. So, like, why not just read some books and break them down?
So what's the story of how you ended up getting out of prison?
So it's a combination of things. I have to credit God. I have to credit a little bit of luck. I have to credit a handful of people who mentored me, who made time to mentor me. A few of my school teachers and my judge, who took a chance with me. And then there was this urge that still exists within inside of me of, once I educated myself and went through college and studied the civil rights movement and economics and American history and many, many other topics, I had a clearer vision of how the world worked. I still don't understand the world completely, but like, I had to understand it. And so I was, a little disappointed in myself that I allowed myself to be lured into the prison industrial complex. But then it was like, well, I feel like my life is redeemable and the system shouldn't throw me away. So I had a chip on my shoulder, and it was like, I'm going to prove that my life is redeemable by educating myself and by not getting in trouble. And any program that y'all bring into this prison, I'm going to make sure I take it. I'm going to make sure I do well, and I'm going to develop a plan. So if I ever have a second chance, I'm going to get out. And then it's not just going to be me trying to do something for myself. I want to let the people know that's incarcerated. I want to let the prison officials know that you shouldn't just throw us away, that our lives are redeemable. So like that was the weight that was on my shoulders. And so that was what was driving me every day. And when I was in college, I struggled with math. And I think about, learning the quadratic equation and all of this like stuff. It's like, when am I ever going to use this in life? But I had to complete it just to prove that I can do it. And so I got through it.
And then what was the actual process of getting out?
So I had applied for a modification of sentence 5 times, which was in my right to do so. And because of politics, usually when you get a life sentence in the state of Maryland, you usually grow old and you die in prison. So it's rare that you get out. It's almost impossible, and you don't get parole. But, I again, like I got to credit a lot of things. I remember having some conversations in my cell by myself, talking to God. He didn't respond to me, or she didn't respond to me, whoever's up there. But I said, I need a sign to know like all this hard work isn't for nothing. And I got a court date 2 days later. The judge, I went back before her, and they reviewed my case. And I had a chance to be honest with my judge about everything in my life and everything that led up to my crime, and how I felt as a mama's boy to watch my mom be abused and neglected, and what that did to me as a person. But I also talked about how hard I worked since that moment I committed my crime, and what I would do if she gave me a chance. And she just stared at me for a while, like she was thinking about it. And she made a decision to reduce my sentence to life or suspended, but 24 years. I had 10 and a half years in at that point, so I was eligible for the halfway house. They didn't give me the halfway house because they were surprised that my sentence was reduced. But overall, I ended up spending 16 and a half years in prison. I maxed out my sentence, or my 24-year sentence. And I came home and I was homeless and unemployed. And I went back to school and just built myself up from there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do want to talk a little bit about life right when you got out. But first, I liked a question that Trevor Noah asked you. To some people on the outside, it may look like the prison that, you said was called a correctional facility, but wasn't. You came out of it in good shape. Talk about why it wasn't the prison system that got you there.
Right. I'm glad you asked me that. I write about this in the book later in the book about it's really important for people to understand that this prison system that I grew up in has been designed to break me. At every corner that I tried, there were obstacles that were before me. They would tell me you would be lucky if you did get out, and you would be lucky if you got a job at a gas station. And it was group punishment. It could be someone on the other side of the prison get caught with a cell phone, whole prison going locked down for days. It just was very cruel in every aspect. And I think it's important for people to understand that, there's nothing special about me. So I don't want people to look at me and say, I can't do what he did. But some teachers went the extra mile. Some people who were incarcerated was like, I'm going to make some time to sit down with you and coach you up. I'm going to break this stuff down to you. They didn't have to do it. And then I had like my personal drive, my sense of agency of that I am a good person and I want to prove it. And so I'm going to prove it through my actions. And so I chose to just learn everything that I could. But the system didn't want me to do it. The system didn't really provide many opportunities for me to do it. And it doesn't do that for most people. There are some stuff available to people that's incarcerated, but it's not, our system isn't set up for that, for people to be.
You mentioned, when you got out, being homeless. It is really unfortunate what the system does when people get out. They just sort of drop them off and leave them to their own devices, even if they've been gone for a long time. And it's a really awful situation to put people into when you're hoping that they can actually reintegrate in society. It certainly, affects the incredible recidivism rates in our country. What was it like for you when you first got out?
It was very scary for me because I had worked so hard, and it was like I was a soldier in basic training, working really hard for many years, and then they put me on a plane and flew me over some island, and they just dropped me in, and it's like you've been trained, you figure it out. So it was like I was nervous. It's like, well, I don't know, like I've been gone a long time. I thought people were crazy talking to themselves, and it was like, nah, people have earpieces in their head now. And the phone, it's all kinds of things. It was just like overwhelming for me. And the system is expecting you to navigate this space, but really they set you up in these positions and give you like limited training and preparation for it because they want you to come back. It's a business now. Of course, you won't figure it out. They say, well, you need to meet your parole or probation officer. You got to catch 2 buses. Well, which buses? How do I catch? Like, what's the plan? And if you don't make it, you go back to prison. You need to take your analysis when you meet with your parole officer, but you got to pay for it. But I don't have a job yet. If you can't pay for it, you go back to jail. It's just so many things.
Yeah, I mean, they just put up all the barriers, right? It's just like they're trying to get you to fail. And it's the number of people I've talked to who end up back incarcerated because they miss a meeting or they even miss a phone call because they're in a class,
Yeah,
right, with their parole officer or something. And it's so sad. And like you said, it's become a business, and we need to do everything we can to turn it into more of a true rehabilitation opportunity.
I agree. I agree 100%. I'm preaching this every day, brother. Yeah, preaching this every day.
So you got out, and I know at one point you ended up, getting your degree from University of Baltimore. What was sort of your next steps as you got out that got you to that?
I still had the premise of, in my mind, of education. So I knew any way that I could educate myself and meet amazing people that I probably would be okay. I knew I didn't have all the answers to what I wanted to do, but I knew like those couple of principles would hold me down. And so I went back to school. Eventually, ended up in this ultra elite entrepreneurship fellowship business program, which was like the Navy SEALs of business school. And it was so strict. I mean, it was kind of like prison. Like there was so many rules. You couldn't miss class. You couldn't use any electronics in class. No phones, no laptops. You had to do your homework. You had to present every class. It was business professional. You had to wear business clothes. It was all these different things, and you had to start a business. And if you couldn't complete all these things, you didn't graduate. And so I really like the challenge and the pressure. And I just like that form of teaching, that tough love, and they really pushed us, and I appreciate it.
Yeah. And so at what point, what was your first company that you started? I know you've started a variety.
Yeah, it was a furniture design and restoration company. So I would design furniture, or I would restore antique furniture that had some historical significance to it.
Yeah, what got you into that?
So I learned how to sew and work with wood in prison through the carpentry shop. And I just was thinking of ways to create job opportunities in the community that I was working in. I was in central Baltimore with so many people that were unemployed, but that was willing to learn. And so out of frustration, I just started hiring people. I started a company. I started working alongside people to create job opportunities for people. And then I would go out and generate contracts and hire local people to work in these contracts.
Yeah, so I know you have your construction company as well, and a lot of it was working in underprivileged communities. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
That was also, so I was working as a workforce development director in that community, in addition to having my furniture company. But I got so frustrated when so many people that would come through orientation at the workforce program that wouldn't get jobs. And it would be because they committed a crime 20 years ago and they just didn't want to take a chance on them. So out of frustration, I said, well, let me start my own contracting company. I'll hire these people and I'll vouch for them, make sure that they're trained up and and are prepared. And then these developers, that's what most of them were, developers. They can just pay me and I'll do the work. And so we grew really fast. We went from, I started out with maybe 3 employees, and we grew to 23 employees in like 6 months.
And is that ongoing? Are you still working in the construction space?
I sold that company, both companies, in 2020. I had contracted COVID in the beginning of 2020. I got really, really sick. I almost died actually twice.
Wow.
And I became a long hauler, which I still am. And I thought about I kept my people on for months, but I just said, I had been painting at this point for a couple of years. And so I decided to sell my companies and just focus primarily on visual art, making paintings, and doing work through my foundation. So that was in 2020.
Got it. Well, congratulations on being able to sell your businesses. I mean, that's a really huge accomplishment, and I'm very sorry you had to deal with COVID and that you continue to deal with it.
Yeah.
So now you're focusing on visual arts. Can you tell me more about what you're up to in that area?
Yes. So I have been painting for 8 years, and I've studied a few places around the world, in Italy and in Paris and a few other places. It is my absolute passion. I paint every day if I can, draw, paint, sculptural work. I have been dabbling in films, short films, mostly criminal justice related films. And I don't think I'll ever stop. And it's one of those professions that you can do for the rest of your life till you can't do it anymore. Like, but Matisse was making art from his deathbed when he couldn't walk. So I'm going to do it as well.
It's a great attitude to have. And where can people see your art? Is there anywhere?
Yes. So a few things. People can see my art through my Instagram page, Chris Wilson's Life. They can also see my art. My site, I just did my new website, which just went live today, but I didn't memorize it, but I will. I'll post it. But I think
I can include it in the show notes for sure.
Perfect. And then my personal website, chriswilson.biz.biz. So you can see, I like to write articles and op-eds. My films are there, and then some of my art, and then, things about my book and projects that I'm working on. So folks can check me out there as well.
Awesome. And I'm excited to hear that you're doing some film work, especially on the criminal justice side. Impact film is something that is of a lot of interest to me and something that I've been working on as well. I think that film is one of those things that really captures people's attention still in this kind of day and age where it is hard to maintain people's attention. And I especially like when messages are subtly incorporated. Like, yes, watching a documentary about criminal justice is great, but, seeing a movie like Just Mercy that, Scott Budnick and some others produced, kind of has a lot of criminal justice messages in it, but you're watching a story about two great characters that captures your mind.
Totally. I mean, that's the best approach. Scott's one of my close friends too. That's the homie.
Oh, great.
It's about, the way to do it is you have to show people and not just tell them. Like, it's not as impactful if I'm telling you how many people we lock up. How about I'll show you?
Put some humanity on it.
Exactly. And so that's important. And then we also have to think about how people these days, especially young people, how we consume our information. And it's usually through like these short videos, snippets. We have to really redefine how we tell our stories and information. And a lot of that's done through film or, through videos.
Looking through your LinkedIn earlier, I saw you started something called Cuttlefish. Is that related to your art or is that something different?
So that's my art company, and my Cuttlefish website is live now, which I just found out this morning. It's a Swiss company that designed it for me. It's actually an interesting website. It's a 3D integrated, really animated website that has my art and my films on here. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I'm excited to dig in further and check that out, and I'll make sure to include links so everybody can take a look.
Totally.
How do you see that evolving over time, and sort of how do you hope your art career evolves?
I think, I believe that art is powerful, that it can be used as a weapon for good. And I want to use it to tell the stories of people who've been impacted by the criminal justice system. I want to use it as a cathartic uh, medium for me to, it's therapeutic for me. My therapist always tells me every week, just put it on the canvas, Chris. And I would make art and collect art even if I wasn't selling it, because I just love it and it's soothing for me. And so I want to continue to do that. And then it also, I have to remind my people often. I say, all of y'all salaries are paid through my art proceeds. So when I say I got to go paint, you probably should let me go paint. And he's just like, all right, go ahead, go paint. So yeah, it saved my life, and it allowed me to live a beautiful life now. And so I got to credit the art for that.
I'm curious if you're familiar with another guest that I've had on, another person that was formerly incarcerated that focuses a lot of his time on art, Halim Flowers.
Yeah, of course, that's my homie. So he is,
Oh, awesome. Good to hear it.
yeah, he is one of my mentees, and I don't say that in a way like I'm speaking down to him, but like he would call me from prison before he got out, and I would give him advice, and he asked a lot of questions about everything, and I kind of coached him up. And even when he came home, I've given him some advice, and I would consider him someone who is skilled and trained, and he's off to the races. We still talk every day and send each other memes through Instagram. But he knows his assignment, and he's executing right now. So that's what I'll say about him.
That's awesome. Yeah, tell him I said hi. He's an incredible entrepreneur, and your influence, now knowing it, it's pretty clear to see it, and I'm sure you had tremendous effect on him.
Yeah, totally. He's a gift to the world.
We've talked a lot about your criminal justice work in general around these other things that you're working on, but what are you really excited about or passionate about that you're working on in criminal justice advocacy right now?
Yes. So I've taken my book, The Master Plan, and turned it into a masterclass style course. So we just talked about Halim, and I think about all the questions that he asked. He knew he was dope. He knew what his potential was, but there was just some things he wasn't sure about. And then people like us are always motivated when we can see an example or preferably meet someone who's come from where we come from, who looks like we look, and that's successful. So I always have a million questions for people that come from our spaces. So I worked on this alongside a few amazing, super smart people to create this 13-unit course to help people like a Halim who think, all right, well, what is my rock bottom? What is my end game? What kind of person do I believe I am? And let me write some things down and create my own master plan, and then work backwards. If I see myself as this successful artist or this entrepreneur, what do I need to be doing now? How did I end up in prison? What does trauma do to my body? What is the criminal justice system? How do I get educated so that I don't get re-incarcerated when I get released? So it's all these things that are included into the course, and it's completely free to people incarcerated.
Wow, that's really cool to hear. And how do you go about getting into them? What is it digital, or how does that work?
So I partner with a company called APDS, American Prison Data Systems, and I decided to partner with them. They provide educational content tablets to people incarcerated, men and women, all around the country, and it is no cost to them. So that I was really interested that they don't charge incarcerated people or their families for it. So I partnered with them to create a course. So we're in 22 states and over 100 facilities, and we just redid the course to do an in-person version that's facilitated by formerly incarcerated people. We pay them really well too. Like they make $50 an hour, which I think is pretty good for someone just coming home. And we train people up. And the mission for this course and going forward in life is, to go back to Halim, is people, there's so much untapped potential in incarcerated individuals. They just need a little help, a little bit of guidance. That's what this course does. And when you graduate from the course, you become a part of our alumni network. So you will continually be supported, your family to us now. And then the rest is up to the individual. Now it's time to execute, but like now you have an army of people who have your back. Now you have training in how you don't go back to prison or how you handle your prison sentence, of the importance of education, the importance of having a plan and surrounding yourself with smart, amazing people.
You've done some incredible work helping people that are incarcerated, that are returning from incarceration. Is there any story that comes to mind of when you really saw kind of face to face that the work you were doing was creating real change?
Yes. So there was a person who I met a few years ago. His name was Saquon. He was in the University of Baltimore's Second Chance College program in Jessup, Maryland. So he had read some articles about me. They invited me in to hear some speeches from the folks that were graduating from the program, 4.0 students. And I remember him telling me about his plight and his counselor telling him about me and handing him some articles about me. And he says, I looked at these articles and you were staring over top of some blueprints and you were building some high rises or some stuff. And I had studied some electricity and I wanted to be a master electrician. And what the picture, when I saw that you was doing it, gave me confidence that I can do it. And so he said this in his speech when I went into prison. It made me tear up. And then maybe a year later or 2 years later, he was released. As soon as he got released, he came to see me at my studio and I was painting. And he was like, I want to start my company tomorrow. I know how to be LLC. I said, listen, go work for an electrical company first. Slow down. Learn the industry. Learn how things are done and then incrementally start your company. So that was, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. So he has his own electrical company now, master electrician. He's doing big contracts for big firms, FedEx, 77 buildings, and doing airports, and he's hiring people from the community. And so
Wow.
I talked to him the other day, like this is an example of what I believe the master plan course will help people with. It's about nourishing and supporting leaders. You get your training and you go out in the world and you be dope and then you build your community up.
Yeah, I mean what an incredible story from him coming to you, so early on, and now to see where he is. That's got to be rewarding.
Yeah, I'm super proud of him.
Do you remember like your first experience that made you feel the importance of giving back?
Yes. I think it was maybe 1998 or something like that when I had graduated from vocational shop, and I was really excited about it. I was bragging about it to my mentor. They said it was a 2-year program. I did it in 13 months. I was happy about this because I really like focused in it and got it. But he wasn't happy. And I said, what's going on? He says, yeah, it's cool that you graduated from vocational shop that fast. He says, but imagine what you can do to help all these brothers in here. And he said, look around. People were playing cards, people smoking and just like getting tattoos. And I said, well, they're not my family. I don't know these people. Why should I like work really hard like to help them? They got to want it for themselves. And he says, you're not wrong, but imagine if you did that. And so I thought about it. And then so I started tutoring. I started creating these study groups and just taking people to the dry erase board and unpacking stuff. And I remember how it made me feel to, for example, explain how you conjugate imperfect verb in Spanish to someone who just polished up their English, or just someone who grasps the concept from a biography that we studied through a book club, and then see them change and then go back to court and get their sentence reduced and go home and get a job and start a family. So I've done that dozens and dozens of times. And so that feeling kind of solidified the importance of, as much as I want to live a dope life, and I will live a dope life, a beautiful life, I won't do it if I can't help other people, if I can't pay it forward. And so that's the deal. That's the trade-off. And so I'm happy with it.
Yeah, I mean, the number of people whose lives that you've impacted, I mean, sure, there's the ones that you know about, but there's dozens, if not hundreds of other, or thousands even, that you've impacted through helping others and helping them impact others. So you should feel incredible about that. I mean, I certainly admire it.
I definitely do. Thank you.
So in terms of mentors, you mentioned Stephen. Is there anyone else that was an especially impactful mentor for you?
Yes. So there was a person who I write about, Tookie Arthur Miles, who I write about in the book, who is now home. He also had a life sentence. I mean, this guy was good at everything. He was a master plumber. He knew how to work all the tools in the carpentry shop. He was a photographer. It was nothing he couldn't do. And so he would always coach me up. Let me show you how to do this. Let me show you how to work with your hands. And so he was very instrumental in me. My god brother, Steven, his dad used to come visit me. His dad was a very spiritual man, but he would give me he would instill in me a lot of faith and confidence to keep pushing and emotional support. So he was definitely someone. And then coming home, there were people who I write about, Jane Brown from the Deutsch Foundation, who saw my potential, to gave me an opportunity to start a business, all my businesses actually, in Baltimore City. She was very instrumental in doing that. And I remember the things that she said to me when I was like, I'll pay you back as soon as I become successful. And she says, you don't pay me back. You pay me back by paying it forward. So you help someone else. You just let me know, keep me posted on all the work that you do. And that was years ago. And, since then I've helped just under 300 people in Baltimore City get jobs. And now we are helping thousands of people that are incarcerated shift their perspective, find that light switch which is inside of them, and develop a plan and come home and be awesome people. So I think I believe this is my life's work, or my legacy.
Yeah, it's such important work. I'm really glad that you're getting to work on it, and hopefully we can make it more ubiquitous throughout the country and elsewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
If you'd like, you can ask me a question.
So, well, I guess I would ask you, what is your thoughts? I know you mentioned earlier when we started this conversation about privilege, and I agree with the statement that you made about privilege. Like, the playing field where we start in life is different for people who are not black and brown in America. And so, my question for you is, how are you, now that you seem to understand your privilege, how are you using it to make a difference in this country?
Yeah, thank you. It's a good question, and I would say I'm using it in working on drug policy reform and criminal justice reform. So, I'm on the board at Marijuana Policy Project, trying to change cannabis laws all over the country, and working with a variety of different both drug policy and criminal justice organizations, working with some reentry organizations, and through this podcast, highlighting people that are doing great work, like yourself, like Halim, like Harley Blakeman, the founder of Honest Jobs, which is an awesome platform that helps people with convictions get jobs. So I'm the type of person that likes to connect people doing good things. So I'm just really trying to keep a pulse of the criminal justice reform efforts, learn as much as I can about it, meet as many people as I can who have direct experience with it, and kind of help make connections that help people increase their impact. Um, so doing what I can there.
I love it. Well, let me know how I can support too as well. I think that's this is really important work.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And um, next up, if everything were to end tomorrow, what would you say that you're most proud of?
I would say that I'm most proud of the master plan course. And if I had to choose a second best, or like what's below that, is that I became an artist. And I used to joke, when I was young, I used to be very terrified when my grandmother said, you're going to die one day. It's like, I don't want to die. What do you mean I'm going to die? It's like, and I would just obsess over, like, but she's like, everyone's going to die. And I said, I want to live forever. And I think when you build stuff and you create, whether it's art, whether it's a program, you get to live forever. And so I think that maybe like when I'm not here, or when none of us are here and the aliens invade us, maybe they'll be peering through my course and they'll say, wow, this guy helped a lot of people, made some cool art. That's it. I can take that. That's good enough for me. I was relevant.
Yeah, no, that's special and something that you can take with you forever.
Yeah. Yeah, that's my plan.
There's one question I make sure to ask every guest, If you could snap your fingers and fix one thing in the world, what would it be, and how do you think that change would reverberate?
This is without a doubt and without any hesitation, racism. I think it's so stupid. It's so dumb. It doesn't make any sense. And it is the most painful, detrimental thing for this country. I have a ton white friends and black friends, and we all want the same things. We all laugh and eat the same foods. It is so stupid what this country has done. And if I could snap my fingers and just make that disappear, that would be the first thing that I would do. It's racism has caused and continues to cause so much harm to this country, and if we can't reconcile this as a country together, then our country's doomed.
Yeah, I agree with you. That would certainly have wide-ranging reverberations. I mean, just the prejudice is just such a terrible thing that's out there, and if we could somehow get rid of it, it would make the world a much better place.
Yeah, I agree.
Chris, I really admire, everything that you've accomplished, and really appreciate you taking the time to chat here. How can people listening support you and your impact?
I would hope that people would do some research on the work that I'm doing through the Chris Wilson Foundation, which is chriswilsonfoundation.com, and read up and preferably support us, what we're doing, whether it's through your time or through financial contributions. I donate my book to prisons and programs around the country through my foundation. 100% of the proceeds of my book supports my foundation and the work that I do. And I just want people to be educated about what's happening in the world and step up and contribute to the solutions.
I like that. Be educated and contribute to the solutions.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, it's been great getting to know you over this time, and I really look forward to continuing our talks and seeing if we can help create some change in criminal justice together. And hopefully, I'm excited to see as your work and your art evolve, and I am always going to be a big fan.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me on today.
Thanks for listening to this episode of People Are the Answer. To find out more, go to peoplearetheanswer.com.